Well, after 3 years of not making this content, turns out that I'm gonna make a few of them in a row. So a couple of weeks ago, last week, taping in advance makes things weird. I released a book to documentary review on The Soul of America by John Meacham, which HBO had recently made into a documentary. I watched that documentary because we had gotten HBO Max for a month to watch Wonder Woman. Well, trying to get my money's worth out of this month of HBO, I also watched a docu-series, and it's a docu-series that I've been looking forward. I meant to watch when it originally came out and didn't because I didn't have HBO Max. So I have it now. It is an HBO documentary, so you would need to watch it there, but it is the 6-part docu-series based on Michelle McNamara's book, I'll Be Gone in the Dark. This is a true crime book about the Golden State Killer. Golden State Killer is the name that Michelle McNamara eventually gives this killer. He's a combination of 3 separate villains who they eventually figured out were the same person: the East Area Rapist, the original Night Stalker, and the Visalia Ransacker. Over the course of this incredibly awful career, the Golden State Killer raped over 50 people and murdered, I think it's about 12. So 12 murders, 50 rapes. It's terrible. It's really, really terrible. Now, normally in a books to documentary review, I would do a full review of the book itself. That book came out a couple of years ago, and it is still the only true crime book that I have ever read and enjoyed. However, Michaela and I did a Betwixt the Books review on it, which I will link up above. And if you want to see both my thoughts and Michaela's thoughts, that's there for you. That's about 12 minutes. I don't want to go over that full 12 minutes all over again. So I'm going to hit you with the specifics that make this book great. Had Michelle McNamara lived to finish this book, I'm sure that it would have been 5 stars from me. However, one of the many tragic things involved in this case, this investigation, this book, is that Michelle McNamara died of a substance abuse overdose in the middle of writing this book. So the weird thing about this book is that it's half written by Michelle McNamara, and then her 2 investigators and her husband, Patton Oswalt, come in at the end to finish the book. So she never got to help bring that book all the way to fruition. This is one of the deepest losses in writing I think I've ever felt, because Michelle's writing, like, she could be describing a paper bag for all I care, and her writing is special. The way that she describes things, the way that she writes, just on a purely, writing style level, is phenomenal and amazing. Some other things that make her part of this book amazing is her ability to do a couple of things that are unusual in true crime. First of all, she is herself in the book. Her struggle, her obsession with finding this guy, with discovering who this man was after this case had gone cold and she felt that people had forgotten about him. And it is an obsession. She talks in the book how the search really it was an incredible journey for her, but it was also had a negative impact on her life. And, she dies in the middle of writing this book. So there were some things going on. It's a very dark thing to live writing about a case this dramatically awful. But because she's present in the book, it gives it a personality that the more stereotypical true crime novels don't have. You feel for the victims, you feel for the survivors, but you also feel for Michelle, and that force propels you forward through the book. Also, regarding the victims and survivors, sometimes I feel like true crime feels like they've got to put the shock value in there. They've got to be gruesome. They've got to be nasty. And that's the way that you're going to feel the extent of the heinous crime that has happened here. What the Golden State Killer did is heinous. But Michelle is able to describe the victims, the survivors, their friends, their families in ways that describes how terrible what happened to them was, but keeps them human. You understand that this is something that happened to a human being who had hopes and dreams and had something terrible happen to them, and how they try to live after that. Even if these people only show up for a paragraph, a page, she has the incredible ability to humanize just the smallest person who intersects with her story. And it makes it feel special. It's genre bending in a way that's really important. The reason that this book isn't 5 stars for me is because unfortunately she dies and the book is picked up by people who never had a chance of being as good as a writer as she was. It's not their fault. She was something special. No one else was ever going to have her incredible personal touch. And also because she did pass away, her presence in the novel, which was incredibly felt, her personal journey is abruptly ended. And you feel that pain, you feel that hurt, but she's not there to finish the work. And the way they handle the transition in the book is kind of jarring. I talk about that more at length in the full thing. But the other thing about this book that is important when it comes to thinking about the book and the documentary is that the book is published before the Golden State Killer is caught. Patton Oswalt and the other co-writers were actually on the book tour when he was eventually caught. So while that is an incredible closure for this book, it's not contained in the pages of the book itself unless they choose to do some kind of a re-release or a second edition now that this gentleman is behind bars for the rest of his life. This book is so incredible that I was a bit concerned on how they were going to change it from this to the documentary. However, the documentary has some things going for it that the book didn't. Obviously, the book preserves Michelle McNamara's writing, but in that sense, you know, it's just as if she thought she was going to finish the book, then it abruptly transitions. The documentary is aware of her passing. It builds in that expectation and that foreshadowing really into the documentary, and it also has the knowledge that the Golden State Killer will eventually be caught, tried, and convicted. So it has the ability at the end to create more closure than the book had the possibility to do at its time, and just because of how they had to put it together around her death. So in this particular case, I feel like it's kind of hard to compare, but I wanted to talk about it because the docuseries is on its own merits an incredible piece of art, and it really brings to it many of the themes that Michelle put in her book in her own unique style, and puts that in the docuseries, which I thought was going to be impossible but turned out not to be. So the docuseries is 6 episodes. Michelle's death happens in episode 4. Just for context, if you needed to know, I found myself really dreading it, and I didn't know that was going to happen, so there you go. The documentary puts as much of Michelle as it can in there. Michelle recorded a lot of her interviews. She recorded phone messages. There are home videos involved. There are, audio and video from interviews or events that she went to. And they also have a narrator who comes in to read her written diaries, her notes. They put her text messages and her emails on the screen. Patton Oswalt really let the HBO crew get a lot of material. In the 4th episode, he even let them have the 911 call that he made from their bedroom. So he has really let them into her life in order to put as much of her in there as possible, and she feels incredibly present the entire time. It also does an amazing job talking to the victims. Many of them are interviewed for this series, and again, there is none of that slash bang, grainy, gross, gruesome retelling of the crimes. There is a sincere and serious effort to say a very terrible thing happened to these people. Here is what happened. Here is how severe it was. Here is how terrible. But these people are not victims. They're survivors. And it focuses almost more on their lives after the fact and how they moved on and how they did or didn't manage to carry on with their lives, but the strength that they came out of that experience with. It's incredible. It's so incredible, and you end up feeling, as Michelle managed to do in a paragraph, in a short interview, you just feel so much for these folks. And I mean, considering how many different people they interview, that was incredible. I tend to think of true crime as very procedural, and I think that's another thing that this documentary does amazingly well, is that it treats itself like a work of art rather than a police procedural true crime documentary, which I have watched probably more of than I've read books of, which is weird now that I think of it, but that doesn't matter. There is a rolling metaphor throughout all 6 episodes about being tugged underwater that connects really interestingly over many interviews, things that Michelle wrote in the past, descriptions of victims. Like, they connect this interview of being like swimming, being tugged underwater. One of the first movies that Michelle and Patton saw as a couple was The Creature from the Black Lagoon, so they use clips from that movie quite a bit, the original black and white, and it ties together so well. And at the beginning I was like, oh, this is a little bit overused, but when you hear descriptions or things that are important to some of the survivors, some of the other people who've been working on this case, it's just really incredible. It's just really well done. And of course, like I said, this documentary has closure in a way that the book couldn't have at the time of its publication. And I found it really striking that while the last word in the documentary is of Michelle, of her story, one of the last things you see is a party of the survivors after the Golden State Killer has been, put away for the rest of his life. Basically saying, we survived him and we're gonna thrive. And I mean, it was just so well done. It was so well done. And of course, being able to see, this man's face and a little bit more understanding of who he was and what happened. There's a whole thing where they thought the crimes were because of a fiance who jilted him, and she's actually interviewed for this. I hadn't even known they knew who that was. So if you are a true crime aficionado, I do think absolutely this is worth your time, 100%. But also, if you're interested in a human story that unfortunately is full of incredible violence, but also is filled with survival and strength, it's worth your time. I highly recommend it. And it's a good use of HBO Max while you have it. So I'm not gonna blather on anymore. I'm just gonna stop here and let you guys go. If you've seen it, let me know. If you read the book, let me know. Talk me up. This is my only true crime reference, though. For any other questions, please see Michaela. She's done far more of it. So thanks for hanging out with me, guys. Hopefully this has been interesting to you. Can't believe I did another one of these so soon. May it not be another 3 years before the next one. Thanks, guys. Bye.